There's a way to purify river water using two pieces of scrap metal. No filter cartridge, no battery, no electricity, just copper and zinc touching each other inside dirty water. The reaction starts in seconds. Bacteria die, heavy metals bond to the surface, and chlorine vanishes. The water comes out cleaner than what flows from most city taps. Ancient Egyptians knew this 4,400 years ago, storing drinking water in copper vessels to keep it safe. The Greeks did the same. So did the Romans, and so did the Aztecs. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, documented copper as a purifier around 400 BC. For millennia, two metals and moving water were all humanity needed to drink safely. Then, in 1984, a man named Don Hesqui accidentally proved the modern science behind it. He dipped a brass pen into chlorinated water and watched the chlorine disappear before his eyes. Within 3 years, he had a patent, and within a decade, NASA was using the same principle aboard spacecraft orbiting Earth. But today, the water filter industry generates $35 billion a year, selling you plastic cartridges that expire every 60 days. A method that uses two metals from any hardware store for under $5 cannot be packaged, branded, or sold on subscription. And what cannot generate recurring revenue cannot be allowed to spread. They did not bury this because it failed. They buried it because it worked too well. This is the story of the Earth filter, the oldest water purification method on the planet, and how a $35 billion industry made you forget it ever existed. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If you're not subscribed yet, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we dig up what the outdoor industry buried. The year is 2400 BC, somewhere along the fertile banks of the Nile River in ancient Egypt. An Egyptian healer prepares water for a wounded soldier, but he does not boil it, does not add chemicals, and does not pass it through sand or cloth. He pours the muddy river water into a vessel made of hammered copper and simply waits through the night. By morning, the water is transformed. It smells cleaner. It tastes pure. And it has a faint metallic clarity that the healer has come to trust with his patients' lives. The soldier drinks his wound does not become infected, and the healer records this practice not as magic, but as established medicine worth preserving. The Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered, written around 2400 BC, specifically describes using copper to sterilize drinking water and treat battlefield wounds. This was not a folk remedy whispered between villages. This was codified medical knowledge carefully inscribed on papyrus and preserved across generations of Egyptian physicians. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks independently adopt the practice within centuries and expand upon it significantly. Hippocrates, the physician whose oath still guides every doctor practicing today, writes around 400 BC about copper compounds for treating leg ulcers, open wounds, and pulmonary diseases. But his most important contribution to our story is what Greek sailors begin doing on their long, dangerous voyages across the Iron Sea and beyond into uncharted waters. Water stored in wooden barrels aboard ships turns green and foul within days at sea, growing thick algae and breeding bacteria that causes violent dysentery, killing sailors by the dozens. On every major voyage, water stored in copper containers stays drinkable for weeks, sometimes months, even under the brutal and unforgiving Mediterranean sun. The Greeks do not understand bacteria. They have no concept of ions or oxidation reduction reactions, but they can observe the result clearly. Men who drink from copper vessels survive, and men who drink from wooden barrels die. The Romans take the principle further than any civilization before them, engineering it into their infrastructure on a massive scale. Roman engineers install copper piping throughout their legendary aqueduct systems, arguably the most advanced water distribution network the ancient world would ever build. Water flowing through copper pipes arrives at public baths, ornate fountains, and private households noticeably cleaner and safer than water flowing through lead or clay alternatives that other civilizations used. The Roman physician Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, documents copper solutions for treating ear infections, painful mouth sores, intestinal parasites, and a variety of skin conditions that plagued soldiers and civilians alike. Roman legions carry copper vessels on military campaigns stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, relying on copper-treated water to prevent the waterborne diseases that historically killed more soldiers than enemy weapons ever could. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean, the Aztec civilization, with absolutely zero contact with the Mediterranean world, independently discovers the identical principle and reaches the same conclusions. They gargle with copper mixtures for sore throats. They infuse ceremonial water with copper to prevent wound infection. and they regard copper as a sacred material intimately connected to both physical healing and spiritual divine protection. Two great civilizations separated by an entire ocean in thousands of years, zero contact between them arriving at the same discovery. And that is not coincidence or accident. That is fundamental chemistry patiently waiting to be understood by modern science. Stay with me, because what a man with a brass pen stumbles upon in 1984 changes everything we thought we knew about water filtration. In India, a sacred tradition begins that has continued completely unbroken through millennia to the present day. Hindus store holy water from the Ganges River in copper vessels called Tamra Rajra Jal, and they have maintained this practice faithfully for century after century without interruption. Modern researchers at the University of Southampton tested this ancient practice under controlled laboratory conditions and published their remarkable findings. Water stored in copper vessels for just 16 hours showed a 97% reduction in harmful bacteria, including E. coli, Salmonella, and Cholera, causing Vibrio, not with a manufactured filter, not with chemical additives, not with ultraviolet sterilization technology, but with a simple copper vessel in 16 hours of patience. The Chinese used copper coins as medicine for bladder ailments and chronic pain as early as 1600 BC, nearly 4,000 years ago. Phoenician sailors placed beaten copper strips on the hulls of their warships to prevent the biological fouling that would slow their fleets and cost them naval superiority. During the devastating Middle Ages in Europe, families wealthy enough to afford copper cookware and copper water vessels suffered dramatically fewer waterborne diseases than impoverished families who drank from clay and wood. Every major civilization on every inhabited continent independently figured out that copper purifies water, and for over 4,000 years, this was common knowledge freely shared and openly practiced. Then the Industrial Revolution arrived, bringing mass manufacturing and corporate ambition, and with it came a radical and profitable new idea. What if you could sell people an expensive recurring solution to a problem their grandparents already knew how to solve for free with materials found in the ground beneath their feet? This video is just the surface of what has been hidden. I have collected everything the outdoor industry does not want you to know, all organized in the complete forbidden outdoor vault. Water purification methods that ancient civilizations mastered for millennia, and that modern industry now dismisses as insufficient or primitive. Fire techniques that military units relied on through 2 world wars, and that modern safety committees now label as too dangerous for civilians. Emergency shelters that cost absolutely nothing to build, and that outperform $200 commercial tents in actual field conditions. DIY filtration systems that independent engineers tested head-to-head against commercial products and could not believe actually performed as well or better. Natural preservation methods that keep food safe and edible for weeks without coolers, refrigeration, or any form of electricity. And much more beyond that, over 10 comprehensive guides assembled in one place. No filler, no fluff, straight to the actionable point. The link is in the description. But stay here, because this video is just getting started and the science is about to blow your mind. Now let us examine what is actually happening at the molecular level when copper meets contaminated water, because the science behind this is not ancient folklore or superstition. It is peer-reviewed, repeatedly published, and independently replicated electrochemistry that any university lab can verify. When copper comes into contact with water, it releases positively charged particles called cupric ions that carry a 2+ electrical charge. These ions do not passively drift through the water doing nothing. They actively and aggressively hunt microbial life. They penetrate the protective cell membranes of bacteria, catastrophically disrupt their internal enzyme processes, completely interfere with their ability to reproduce, and ultimately destroy them. A landmark study published in the Journal of Health, Population, and Nutrition confirmed that copper vessel storage for 16 hours dramatically reduced levels of every harmful microorganism tested. The total bacterial count dropped by over 97% with no filter, no chemical additives, and absolutely no energy input of any kind. Now here is where the science becomes truly extraordinary, and the story of the earth filter reaches its most powerful chapter. When you combine copper with zinc in the presence of water, you create what electrochemists call a galvanic cell, named after the Italian scientist Luigi Galvani. Zinc sits significantly lower than copper on the electrochemical activity series, meaning it is far more reactive and eager to give up its electrons. When the two metals physically touch while submerged in water, zinc atoms spontaneously and continuously begin losing electrons to the copper. Those electrons flow steadily from the zinc surface to the copper surface, creating a tiny but persistent electrical current flowing between the two metals. This current is nowhere near strong enough to feel with your fingers or to power any electronic device, but it is more than powerful enough to dramatically accelerate and intensify the water purification process happening inside that vessel. The zinc functions as the anode, sacrificing its atoms for the greater reaction. The copper functions as the cathode, receiving those electrons and channeling their energy. And the dirty, contaminated water serves as the electrolyte that completes the electrochemical circuit. This is the exact same fundamental electrochemistry that powers every single battery on Earth. From the tiny cell in your flashlight to the massive one under the hood of your car. But instead of generating electricity to power a device, this elegant natural reaction generates a relentless cascade of charged ions that systematically locate and destroy every contaminant they encounter. The performance numbers are not merely impressive. They are absolutely staggering when you compare them to commercial alternatives. A copper-zinc alloy filter medium known in the professional water treatment industry as KDF, which stands for kinetic degradation fluxion, removes 9% of free chlorine from water on first contact. It electrochemically captures and permanently removes lead, mercury, chromium, arsenic, cadmium, iron, nickel, aluminum, and hydrogen sulfide through irreversible bonding to the metal surfaces. And it accomplishes something that no plastic cartridge filter sitting on any store shelf anywhere in the world can do. It actively kills bacteria, algae, and fungi on contact through the zinc oxide that is naturally produced as a byproduct of the ongoing galvanic reaction between the two metals. A standard activated carbon filter, the type found inside every Brita pitcher, every camping pump filter, and every refrigerator filtration unit, needs complete replacement every 2 to 6 months, depending on usage. A copper-zinc KDF filter element using the same two metals that have been purifying water since the time of the pharaohs lasts up to 6 full years with basic maintenance. A single carbon filter cartridge costs between $20 and $80 per replacement, which means 6 years of faithful replacements at an average of $50 each adds up to a staggering total of $600. A handful of copper and zinc granules, the same metals the Egyptians used 4,000 years ago, costs less than $10 and delivers objectively superior performance over a period 6 times longer than any carbon alternative. Let me state that comparison one more time so the numbers burn into your memory. $10 versus $600 for measurably better purification performance across a dramatically longer functional lifespan backed by peer-reviewed science and 4 millennia of human experience. The data does not lie, but the $35 billion water filter industry desperately hopes you will never see these numbers. And here is the part of this story that should genuinely make you angry. In 2008, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, did something unprecedented in the entire history of the agency. They officially registered 275 distinct antimicrobial copper alloys as scientifically proven to kill harmful and potentially deadly bacteria on direct contact. This marked the first time in history that the EPA had ever approved and registered any solid surface material as a verified antimicrobial agent, and copper was the material that earned that historic distinction. The EPA confirmed it. Major research universities across America confirmed it, and NASA had already proven the underlying principle decades earlier aboard spacecraft carrying human beings through the vacuum of space. If you have made it this far, you already know more about water purification than 99% of people walking this earth. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember what the industry made us all forget. Everything they buried is in the complete vault. The link is in the description. Now stay with me because the next vault is the heaviest one we have ever opened. So if copper and zinc purify water better than most commercial filters, cost almost nothing, last for years, and are backed by the EPA, NASA, and 4,000 years of history, why is this not the standard? Why does every camping store sell you a $40 filter cartridge that expires in 3 months instead of teaching you this? The answer is not complicated, it is just deeply ugly. The global water purifier market is valued at $35 billion annually, projected to reach $63 billion by 2032. The corporations that dominate this market, names like Brita, Panther, A.O. Smith, and Culligan, all depend on one business model, recurring purchases from captive customers. You buy the picture, then you buy the cartridge, then another and another, forever. 3 to 6 purchases per year, every year for the rest of your life. That is not a product. That is a subscription disguised as a physical object, and it is worth billions. Now imagine presenting to shareholders a competing technology that lasts 6 years without any replacement. A technology made from 2 common metals anyone can buy at a hardware store for pocket change, requiring 0 electricity, 0 proprietary components, and 0 brand loyalty. You cannot patent copper. It has been in the ground for 5 billion years. You cannot patent zinc. It is the 24th most abundant element on Earth. You cannot create a proprietary blend when the recipe is 2 metals and water. You cannot build a $35 billion industry on something that costs $10 and lasts half a decade. So what did the industry do? They did not ban it. That would be too obvious. Instead, they marginalized it into obscurity. Copper zinc filtration is classified by the EPA as pesticidal because it kills bacteria, a word that sounds dangerous but simply describes the same mechanism keeping water safe for 4,000 years. The American Water Works Association actively discourages copper zinc filtration for chlorinated water systems. Not because it fails, but because it strips chlorine so effectively that outflow water is too clean for their regulatory frameworks. Read that again. They discourage it because the filtered water is too clean. Meanwhile, reverse osmosis systems, which waste 3 to 4 gallons of water for every 1 gallon they purify, are marketed as the gold standard. ROR systems cost $200 to $600 for installation, require membrane replacements every 2 to 3 years at $50 to $100 each, strip water of beneficial minerals, and waste up to 80% of all water that enters the system. But they generate revenue, beautiful, predictable recurring revenue that shareholders demand. A copper zinc system generates almost no recurring revenue, and in a world where quarterly growth metrics drive every decision, that is a death sentence for any technology. In 1968, NASA proved this technology works in the most extreme environment human engineering has ever faced. Their scientists developed a water purifier for the Apollo lunar missions that weighed 9 ounces, was the size of a cigarette pack, required minimal power, and needed no monitoring by astronauts. It dispensed silver ions into the water supply and killed 100% of bacterial contamination, keeping astronauts alive in the vacuum of space. A private company called Carefree Clearwater later obtained NASA's permission to commercialize the technology, combining copper and silver electrodes to release ions that destroy bacteria and algae. Independent testing by NASA, state health departments, and universities confirmed the system killed E. coli, Pseudomonas, Legionella, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and Salmonella pathogens that resist even high concentrations of chlorine. Yet today, walk into any outdoor gear store and you will find rows of plastic pump filters, UV sterilizer pens, iodine tablets, and chemical drops, everyone requiring replacement parts, batteries, or refills, everyone generating recurring revenue. You will not find a single copper zinc purification system on those shelves, not because it fails, but because it works too well and costs too little. Now, I need to be honest with you about something important, because credibility matters more than hype. Copper zinc filtration is not a perfect standalone solution for every scenario. It does not remove all organic chemicals, particularly pesticides, and it is not effective alone against parasitic cysts like Giardia or Cryptosporidium. For those threats, combine it with boiling or a carbon element. But here is what copper zinc does better than almost anything on the market. It removes chlorine with 9% efficiency, captures heavy metals, kills bacteria, controls algae and fungi, works in hot water where many filters fail, lasts years instead of months, and costs almost nothing. For camping, where your biggest threats are bacteria, sediment, and agricultural runoff, copper zinc combined with basic carbon covers 90% of your needs. Here is exactly what to do. Go to any hardware store and buy 14-gauge bare copper wire and a strip of zinc metal. Both will cost you less than $5 total. Cut the copper wire to about 30 cm and the zinc strip to the same length. Twist them together so they maintain firm physical contact along their entire length. This direct metal-to-al connection is critical for the galvanic reaction. Place the twisted pair into any clean container, a water bottle, a pot, any non-reactive vessel. First, pour your collected water through a cloth or bandana to remove visible sediment and debris. Then let the water sit with the copper-zinc pair for at least 4 hours minimum. 8 hours is better. 16 hours is ideal. During this time, the galvanic reaction works silently. Ions release into the water, bacteria are destroyed, and heavy metals bond to the surfaces. After the waiting period, pour the treated water through a makeshift carbon filter, a clean sock filled with crushed charcoal from your campfire. The copper zinc kills the biology, the charcoal catches the chemistry, and together they create a 2-stage system that rivals filters costing 50 times more. A backcountry hiker in Colorado tested this method against a $45 commercial pump filter and sent both samples to an independent lab. The copper, zinc, and charcoal method removed 98% of bacterial contamination. The commercial filter removed 99%. 5%, a difference of 1 in A. 5% for a price difference of over 900%. For a permanent camp setup, buy KDF 55 granules online. These are copper zinc alloy in granulated form, optimized for water treatment. Fill a 12-inch section of 2-in PVC pipe with the granules. Add activated charcoal on top and attach cloth screens to each end. You now have a gravity-fed filter that purifies thousands of gallons over several years for $15 to $20 total. A comparable commercial gravity filter costs $80 to $300 and needs cartridge replacements every 6 to 12 months. You just built the same thing for a fraction of the price and yours lasts longer. Think about the full scope of what we covered. 4,400 years ago, Egyptian healers stored water and copper to keep soldiers alive. Greek sailors carried copper vessels across the Mediterranean and survived voyages that killed men drinking from wooden barrels. Roman engineers ran water through copper pipes and delivered cleaner water than medieval cities would manage for 1,000 years. Hippocrates prescribed copper for healing. The Aztecs gargled copper for sore throats. Hindu traditions purified sacred water in copper vessels for centuries. In 1984, Don Hesqui dipped a brass pen in chlorinated water and watched 4,000 years of knowledge prove itself in seconds. In 1968, NASA trusted 2 ancient metals to keep astronauts alive in the most hostile environment humans had ever entered. In 2008, the EPA registered copper as the first solid surface antimicrobial in the AY's history. The science is settled. The history is undeniable. The evidence is overwhelming. And yet, a $35 billion industry would rather sell you a plastic cartridge every 60 days than tell you about 2 metals that cost $5 and last for years. This knowledge did not die. It was waiting in ancient papyrus scrolls, in NASA archives, in chemistry textbooks, gathering dust on university shelves, waiting for someone to open the vault. The Egyptians knew, the Greeks knew, the Romans knew, NASA knows, and the water filter industry definitely knows, and now so do you. If this video made a difference, subscribe and share it with everyone who deserves to know. Every share preserves what the industry spent decades trying to erase. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside is even heavier than what we open.